Daniel Sports Central, we go over our next team projection of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Alabama Crimson Tide, a team that won the national championship in 2020. These were your national champions last year, and this team has still got a lot of returning talent and a lot of potential going into the 2021 season, and that's what we're going over here today. We're also going to be going over a few players that the Crimson Tide will be losing, who they're returning, and also looking at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with the previous 6 games for Alabama. And if you look at this team over the course of the season, I mean, they were so consistent, and I was saying this all last year. They were just easily the most consistently dominant team in all of the nation last season, and I mean, from start to finish, this team played an outstanding year. They were 13-0 overall. They beat Auburn 42-13 in the last 6 games. They also beat LSU 55-17. That was an outstanding win there on the road. So really, I mean, they completely destroyed the rivals there. They also beat Arkansas 52-3, beat Florida in the SEC championship game by a score of 52-46. So this team put up a lot of points over the course of last season. I think they averaged right over 50 points per game last year. They also beat Notre Dame 31-14 in the college football playoff semifinal game, and that was before beating Ohio State in the national championship game. 52-24 was the final score in that matchup. So really, I mean, Alabama, once again, this team was so good last season. They were so consistent, and really that's what really was the key to success for the Crimson Tide. First 6 games for Alabama, they were 6-0. Obviously in the last 7, they were also 7-0, considering this team was undefeated. Here's your roster preview for next season. They lose their starting quarterback, Mac Jones. He's going to be going on to the NFL, and I'm assuming he's going to be drafted in the first round. I'm pretty sure he'll honestly get drafted in the first 16 picks for sure. But Mac Jones last year was the most accurate quarterback in the nation, 77% completion rate, which, I mean, that's insane. I think he had the best completion rate by far. I mean, a 77% completion rate is outstanding. Most quarterbacks can't even get close to 70%, let alone Mac Jones is going almost up to 80%. So he had an outstanding year. Put up 4,500 yards as well as 41 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. So Mac Jones, honestly, I'd say is easily one of the best quarterbacks going into the draft. I'd probably argue that he's maybe even the 4th best quarterback. I mean, we got lots of great quarterbacks in this draft. I mean, like Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. Mac Jones should be in the conversation for that, I would say, to be possibly even top 3. But if you look at the rest of this team, Bryce Young will be taking over at quarterback next year. He has not had a whole lot of experience with starting, but I think he's going to do just fine. We've seen quarterback after quarterback coming to Alabama and be successful, so I think they're going to be just fine there. Lose their top running back in Najee Harris. That is definitely something to watch out for. Najee Harris will probably be going in the first round of the draft as well. Last year, he put up nearly 1,900 yards and 30 touchdowns. He was outstanding last year. Definitely the best running back going into this year's NFL draft. They do return their second running back in Brian Robinson. Looking at him last year, he put up 500 yards and 6 touchdowns, so it was a good season for him. As for the receiving core, I mean, they lose their Heisman receiver in Devontae Smith. So this offense is losing a ton of key players. I mean, they lose their quarterback, their running back, and their wide receiver. If this was any other team other than Alabama, I'd be very concerned right now. But we all know how much Alabama is able to return and how much depth this team has in general. Like, this team has got such great recruiting year after year, and that's why this team has so much depth, and that's why they're able to be so good year after year, is because they've got so much depth for them to hang on to, especially when they're losing major key players. I mean, they of course had Tua a few years ago, and then Mac Jones comes in and plays just as good as him. So I mean, really, if you look at this team in general, the receiving core does lose a couple of key players. Once again, you got Devontae Smith, who was outstanding last year, putting up nearly 2,000 yards of receiving, 24 touchdowns, which, I mean, those are outstanding stats for a receiver. But they do return their second receiver, John Mechie. He is a young player on this team that's got a ton of potential. Looking at him last year, he was outstanding as well. I mean, if you look at him, he put up 916 yards and 6 touchdowns. Then, of course, it was our third receiver, Jalen Waddle. He was injured for a good chunk of the season, but he still put up 600 yards and 4 touchdowns. So, I mean, it wasn't a terrible season for him. If he's able to be healthy, he'll be a huge impact in the NFL. Looking at the offensive line, they lose 3 on there. They lose 1 defensive lineman, 2 linebackers, and then 1 in the secondary. So they lose 4 starters on the defensive side, which, I mean, considering how much depth this Alabama team always has, I think they're going to be just fine on both sides of the ball for sure. I mean, once again, this offense, if this was any other team other than Alabama, like if it was, say, Notre Dame or something, even Notre Dame, yeah, Notre Dame's been good, but even if it was them, I'd be very concerned because, I mean, you're losing a Heisman receiver, you're losing the best running back that's going to be going into the upcoming draft, and you're also losing Mac Jones, or a great quarterback who was also outstanding. So for Alabama, they're losing a ton of talent on this offense. This offense is going to look a lot different next season. But once again, it's just the depth factor on Alabama, and why this team is so dominant and so successful is because of the recruiting. Like, year after year, this team, I mean, even last year, I think this year they got the the best recruiting class in all of the nation. So this Alabama team has got a ton of depth, and that's why they're going to be so successful once again next year. But once again, chances of another national title in 2021, I would not be surprised to see this team be right back in the running. I mean, obviously, we did see a down year out of Alabama a few seasons ago, but I don't expect that to happen this year. This team has, once again, got so much depth, and I could easily see them going on to the college football playoff for sure. Like this team, I don't see them missing it. But for your schedule, you start off the season against Miami. Could be an interesting matchup there on September 4th. Obviously, Miami was pretty good last year, so that could come to be possibly a close matchup at first. You got Mercer, of course. That's probably going to be a game where Alabama could put up 80 points if they really wanted to. I got Florida on the road on the 18th. That's going to be an interesting matchup. Florida, of course, has lost a lot of talent as well going into 2021. So, I mean, it could make for an Alabama win, but it's going to be close, I do think. We got Southern Miss then on the 25th. You got Ole Miss coming to town on October 2nd. Then you got Texas A&M, very important game there. I mean, if any team is going to beat Alabama right now in the SEC West, it'd either be LSU or Texas A&M. But Texas A&M right now, I mean, they got some good talent coming back into next season, so watch out for that game there. Mississippi State on the road on the 16th. You also got them. Then you got Tennessee, and LSU comes to town to start your November. LSU next season, I don't think LSU is going to be a national title team, but I do think there's a chance that we could see them come right back to being a college ball playoff contender at least. So yeah, those Texas A&M and LSU games will definitely be crucial. You got New Mexico State on the third to last week of the season. Then Arkansas, and of course, the annual game against Auburn to finish out the year, which Auburn is a mess right now. So you could easily go either way on that matchup. But looking at the first half of your season, you got Miami, of course. Should make for an interesting matchup. I'm going to say it's going to be a close game right now. Once again, this is just a projection video, so this isn't going to be me predicting every single game quite yet, since we're too early on, I'd say, in the offseason for me to make predictions. But these are just projections here. Miami, I do expect it to be a close one. I'm definitely favoring Alabama right now. I just don't think that they've got a higher than 80% chance of winning that game right now. But it's certainly close, though. I think Alabama should be favored there. Mercer's going to be a win. You also could say Florida. I mean, Florida's going to be a tough one on the road there. Florida's a tough place to play, especially when they got lots of fans in the stands. Hopefully we do get to see fans in the stands by fall. But for Florida, they're going to be a good team once again next season. I don't expect them to be a college ball playoff team by any means, but I do think Florida's got a chance to make it to a good bowl game at least. So it will be a tough game there at the start of the season. Southern Miss and Ole Miss will both be wins. Of course, Ole Miss was halfway decent last year, but I think this next year Alabama's probably going to wipe them off. And then you got Texas A&M, of course, on October 9th. That's going to be an interesting one on the road there, especially if it's a night game. That could come to be a close game. I'd probably say that's the most troubling game of Alabama this upcoming season, is having to travel to College Station there. But in the second half of your season, you got Mississippi State, of course. That's going to be a win. Tennessee's going to be a win. LSU could come to be an interesting matchup, especially if LSU is able to improve on last year, which I definitely expect them to. I mean, LSU is they're returning. I think there's a stat like they're returning 20 of their 22 starters from last year. So LSU is certainly going to be a team that's going to be a lot better next year. Definitely a bowl team at least. You got New Mexico State then. That's going to be a win. Arkansas is going to be a win. And then Auburn to finish out the year. I'm going to keep that as a yellow game for now. So I've got you getting 7 guaranteed wins. And then those 5 games, of course, I'd probably favor Alabama in all 5 of those close games right now. But your bracket projection is going to be 11-1 to 12-0. This team could easily be 12-0 once again. It would not surprise me to see this team be possibly another national title team. Like, they just got so much talent. And with Nick Saban, as long as Nick Saban's with Alabama, you cannot doubt this team a single bit. So, Alabama, 11-1 to 12-0. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on the Crimson Tide. Let me know your record predictions and all of that down in the comments. I appreciate you guys all watching once again, though. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I will see you guys all later.